Hey guys, I'll be continuing the writings that I've been doing in like telling you about being diagnosed as a diabetic here within vlogs now, just because it's going to be a bit easier on me. um, so in the last vlog, I left off with being in the hospital and not understanding anything that was being done, not understanding effectively. I mean, I had the tools, I had the basic principles of you inject this, but I didn't understand what it was actually doing or how it was affecting the body or or like an effective understanding of it all. It was just like the basic things of you inject you inject this insulin at this time, you inject the other insulin at this time, you check your blood sugar, etc., and do as best you can to keep your sugars between 4 and 8. I mean, that's basically what I got out of it. I'm sure that more was said to me, but didn't take it all in. So when I got out of the hospital, um, I I think the day after I went back to school, and I was basically just like handed all this information and not given any time to like start to live it or to effectively apply it and understand it in my living, but just like right back into the pattern that I was living, right back into the habits that I was living without any corrective application or an understanding of myself within the habits. And with all this information told to go about my life that I was living previously. And that's basically what I did. I mean, I didn't look into any of my eating habits or my living habits or my relationship with myself in the food that I was consuming or within water that I was drinking or the pop that I was drinking. I just went right back into it with all like the regular pop that I was drinking. I would just substitute it for diet pop. I mean, none of it was investigated within me, nor told, nor like suggested, like maybe you should look at what you're eating. But basically, what I took out of it was you can still eat what you want, but you just have to inject insulin for it. So I don't know if I've covered this in the blog, but for every 10 grams of carbs that I eat, that sends the sugar up 2 millimeters a liter, which is similar to like parts per million if you understand that better. But it's a very small measurement of something within a liquid. And so if I eat 10 grams, it goes up 2 milliliters a liter. And if I inject 1 unit of insulin, that was 2. So 1 click is 1 unit. If I inject that 1 unit, that brings it down to 2 milliliters a liter. So for every 10 grams of carbs, I do one of those units. So, I mean, with that information, it was just like I can see what I want. I just have to inject that insulin. So I was still eating like 2 sandwiches at a meal, which is roughly, given the type of bread, it's roughly like 120 grams, which is a lot of carbohydrates for a meal. Because I mean, if you have to consider that all of that sugar needs to go into the cells through or via insulin, and to be expelled through physical movements and energy. I mean, that's a lot of energy to use within one moment, which is cool because actually that brought up something within me. I'll write about it later. So when I got out of the hospital, I was just sent back into the same life that I was living in. It was tough to cope at first, because I mean, so when I was diagnosed, I was 14, which I was basically just starting or heading into puberty. And when you're in puberty and you have diabetes, they have something called the honeymoon phase, where your body is going through all these rapid changes and all these hormones in their body, and the blood sugar becomes affected as well, and the insulin sensitivity becomes affected as well. And it can be quite difficult to manage the sugars during the honeymoon phase. So as I was diagnosed, I was basically headed into that. I didn't have any ability to create a regimen or a routine, nor did I even try, to be honest. Um, but yeah, I was just thrown back, and it's like, even with what I was eating, I was still doing the regimen and routine within 10 grams to 1 unit, but that varied every so often, and that still varies now with how much exercise I do or whether I sit around all day. And it can vary quite a bit, like a lot, actually. Um, so yes, being thrown into my life, back into the system, back into having to go to school and live all the responsibilities without any proper understanding or living habits or corrected living habits of myself. It wasn't fun nor effective to understand having diabetes and what it takes to effectively manage within having diabetes. Yeah, because throughout like the first throughout yeah, until I was like 17 or so, it's like some of the sugars, it was just ridiculous. Like I remember being up at 32 units, 32 milliliters a liter within the blood sugar, which is high because you're supposed to be between 4 and 8. But I was at that, and at that time I was taking good care of myself. Like the day before, I remembered that I was doing okay, and I was still doing everything the same. And it's just that one day where I may have forgotten something, but I am quite sure that I was taking effective care of myself, yet it just, the insulin sensitivity just stopped. And I had to start injecting more insulin for what I was eating instead of the same amount. And so it varies so much. And what's cool about like that point where it's just like kind of like an immediate change is that I notice that things change with the weather. Where if I go into the winter, or as the winter's coming, I find that I'm going to need more injections, or sorry, higher amounts of insulin to correct the same amount of food, probably because of a lack of activity within outside and a lack of um, metabolism supported by the sun. But I find that I need higher amounts of insulin. I've rambled on a bit. Um, so yeah, the biggest point with him getting out of the hospital was going back into my life and having all this information and trying to live it and still continue on with school. Like here's insulin, here's the supplies, here's how you inject, here's the food that you can here's the food that you can eat that won't have any effect on your sugar. Here's the food that you can't eat, or that you can eat, but it will have an effect on your sugar. Here's food that may or may not have an effect on your sugar. It's best to check that out. Here's foods that you should never eat. Here's foods that you can eat once in a while. Yeah, I mean, yeah, here you have to inject insulin at this time, and you have to inject this other insulin at this time. And like I did not have a proper understanding at all of it, and I was just like, it was all pushed on me, and then I had to go back into my life and still focus on everything, and like focus on school and focus on all the bullshit within like insecurities within society, within the environments, and do my best to weave my way through it and continue to understand and support myself as a diabetic. And it's difficult. So I will be writing about that point within the high amounts of energy within one point where if I'm eating a whole bunch and I'm doing that insulin, all of that energy is going to have to go into the cells and be expelled in some form or manner. And I find that there's a relationship between myself and the mind, and high amounts of energy and low amounts of energy, similar to how I eat, which is fascinating. Cool. So I'll write about that and I'll share it, and I will continue sharing you with when I was diagnosed and events leading up to it, and struggles that I've had throughout having diabetes, and if or how I've decided to correct it. And so enjoy.